At 75, Chris Norman, the iconic voice behind Smokey's greatest hits, has finally spoken out about Suzi Quatro. For decades, Norman has been known for his husky vocals, emotional honesty, and enduring legacy. Yet until now, his relationship with Quatro and his thoughts about her influence have remained largely unspoken. This isn't just another story about rock history. It's a rare moment of clarity from a man who has lived through the wild rise of 1970s rock, the pressures of fame, and the quiet discipline of family life. Now, with the perspective that only time can bring, Norman is opening up about the era, the competition, and the respect he's always held for a pioneer who broke barriers when few women dared to step into that world. This is the story of how one musician finally speaks the truth about another. A young boy with a musical bloodline. Chris Norman was born Christopher Ward Norman on October 25, 1950, in Redcar, North Yorkshire, England. Music wasn't a hobby in his home, it was life. His father was a professional singer and entertainer, and the family's move to Bradford placed young Chris in the heart of Britain's post-war music revolution. Rock and roll, skiffle, and early pop were reshaping youth identity, and Norman absorbed it all. As a teenager, he learned guitar and began performing with school friends, developing the husky vocal style that would later define him. His voice was raw, emotional, and unmistakably human, unpolished but deeply expressive. Even in his early years, he stood out among more theatrical singers. Norman wasn't interested in showmanship. He wanted honesty, and that desire would guide his career through decades of change. The birth of Smokey, a band that changed everything. In the mid-1960s, Norman formed a band with friends Alan Silson, Terry Utley, and Ron Kelly, later replaced by Pete Spencer. After years of performing under different names and struggling to gain attention, the group finally found its identity as Smokey. Their breakthrough came in the mid-1970s when they began working with legendary songwriting duo Nicky Chinn and Mike Chapman. With Norman's voice at the forefront, Smokey released a string of international hits that captured the era's spirit. Songs like Living Next Door to Alice, If You Think You Know How to Love Me, Don't Play Your Rock and Roll to Me, and Lay Back in the Arms of Someone became global anthems. Norman's vocals balanced vulnerability and strength, giving the songs emotional depth and relatability. Smokey became especially beloved in Europe and Australia, selling tens of millions of records and earning a devoted fan base. At this point, Chris Norman wasn't just a singer, he was the face of a generation. The weight of fame, creative strain, and new direction. By the early 1980s, years of relentless touring and industry pressure began to take their toll. The band's success had become a machine, and Norman felt creatively constrained. He longed to explore music on his own terms, without the constant demands of the hit-making system. In 1986, he made the difficult decision to leave Smokey and pursue a solo career. It was a major risk. He was leaving a successful band at the peak of its popularity, but the move proved transformative. His first solo breakthrough came in the form of a duet with Suzi Quatro, Stumblin' In. The song became a massive international hit, topping charts and introducing Norman to a new generation of listeners. It also revealed a softer, more intimate side of his voice. In that moment, he proved he could succeed on his own terms, and that his talent was not limited to one band. A solo star. The voice that refused to fade. After Stumblin' In, Norman released a series of solo albums that solidified his reputation as a mature, emotionally driven artist. Hits like Midnight Lady, Some Hearts Are Diamonds, and No Arms Can Ever Hold You became especially popular in Germany, Scandinavia, and Eastern Europe, where he achieved near-legendary status. Unlike many artists who struggle after leaving a successful band, Norman thrived by staying true to his instincts. His solo music blended pop, soft rock, and subtle country influences, focusing on love, longing, reflection, and resilience. His songwriting grew more introspective, and his performances became increasingly heartfelt. He refused to rely on nostalgia or past success, choosing instead to build a long-lasting career through sincerity and consistency. This is why his voice still matters today, because it never felt manufactured. It felt lived in. The video age. Awards, recognition, and a new era. Norman's international appeal was confirmed in 1994 when he won CMT Europe's International Video Star of the Year. In an era when music television shaped global stardom, the award recognized not only his voice, but his ability to connect visually and emotionally with audiences across borders. It proved his solo career stood on its own. A decade later, he returned to the spotlight through the German TV show Comeback on ProSieben. The program reunited legendary artists and gave Norman a stage to remind audiences why his music had never faded. The highlight was his performance of "Stumblin' In" as a duet with pop icon Suzi Quatro. The show ended with a reunion performance alongside Smokey, a moment that felt less like television and more like a heartfelt celebration. The world was reminded, Chris Norman wasn't a relic. He was still very much alive in music. The White Nights, a festival that proved his legacy. In 2019, Norman headlined the White Nights Music Festival in St. Petersburg, a celebration of the legendary Russian artist Alla Pugacheva's 50-year career. Being chosen as a headliner for such a symbolic event spoke volumes about the respect he commands across Europe. Sharing the stage with artists like Level 42, Bonnie Tyler, and Svetlana Loboda, Norman delivered a performance that blended decades of experience with undiminished passion. Under the luminous white night sky, he proved that true legacy isn't measured by trends or chart positions. It's measured by the ability to move audiences across generations. For many fans, that performance was proof that his voice still carried the same emotional weight it did in the 1970s, only deeper, more weathered, and more human. A quiet life, family, stability, and the Isle of Man. Chris Norman's personal life has remained quietly stable, a stark contrast to the chaos of the music industry. In 1970, before Smokey's global fame, he married his wife Linda. Their marriage began before the pressures of stardom, built on youth, trust, and shared values rather than celebrity. Over the decades, their relationship endured, and they raised 5 children together. In an industry known for broken marriages and scandal, Norman's loyalty became part of his identity. In 1986, the family moved to the Isle of Man, seeking privacy and peace. The island became a refuge from the spotlight, allowing Norman to focus on music without sacrificing family life. From there, he continued to tour internationally and record new albums. The Isle of Man wasn't just a home, it was a sanctuary where he could stay grounded and connected to the values that shaped him. The first time he speaks why Suzi Quatro matters. At 75, Chris Norman has reached a stage in life where reflection comes naturally. After decades of success, touring, and artistic growth, he has finally spoken openly about Suzi Quatro. Norman says the early 1970s music scene felt raw, competitive, and alive with possibility. Suzi Quatro arrived like a force of nature, an artist who changed the landscape. She didn't fit into any existing mold. She created her own. Norman emphasizes that her impact went far beyond chart success. As a female rock musician playing bass and fronting a hard-edged band, she broke rules in an industry dominated by men. Back then, it simply wasn't done. She didn't ask permission. She demanded her place through talent, attitude, and sheer stamina. For Norman and other male musicians, Quatro forced a shift in perspective. Suddenly, the old assumptions didn't apply. A tribute of respect, the woman who changed the game. Norman's memories of their encounters are warm. Their paths crossed during tours, TV appearances, and industry events, and he recalls Quatro as straightforward and no-nonsense. She didn't pretend or perform, she simply was. She possessed a rare balance of toughness and humor, able to hold her own in any room and laugh at herself. Norman also acknowledges the pressures she faced behind the scenes. Pressures fans never saw. She had to work twice as hard to be taken seriously. Many artists were controlled and packaged by management, but Quatro fought to maintain her identity. She knew who she was and refused to let anyone rewrite her story. Norman says that today, we must recognize her influence honestly, not as a novelty, not as the female version of Used, but as a true rock artist in her own right. Why now? The honesty of age. When asked why he chose to speak now, Norman says age brings honesty. You stop worrying about how things will be taken, he explains. You just want the record to be fair. For him, fairness means acknowledging Quatro's influence and resilience. He says she deserves her place in history, not as a side note, but as a pioneer. Time has softened rivalries and misunderstandings that once seemed important. We were all trying to survive and succeed, he says. Sometimes that creates distance. Now, he says, there is only respect. When I look back, I feel grateful to have shared that era with people like Suzi, he adds. She raised the bar for everyone. Outro. A final word from a legend. Chris Norman's career spans decades of hits, tours, and artistic reinvention, but his most powerful moment may be this, a simple, honest tribute to a fellow pioneer. At 75, Norman speaks not as a rival, but as a witness to history. He offers a message to younger artists. Look at Suzi Quatro. Look at her courage, her strength, and her refusal to be limited by expectations. In the end, Norman's tribute is more than admiration. It's a reminder that the greatest artists are those who change the rules simply by being themselves. If you were moved by this story, share your favorite Chris Norman or Suzi Quatro song in the comments. And if you want more stories from the heart of rock history, like and subscribe.